Today, former Deputy Staff Secretary to President Bill Clinton, David Goodfriend, also with us, host of Tim Constantine's Capitol Hill show, the very one, the very only, Tim Constantine. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thanks very much.
All right, Tim, who's making the better closing argument, Cruz or Trump?
Well, I think Cruz is being very effective here. Anytime you can use someone's words against themselves, that's a good thing. And Trump has, for some odd reason, made inroads with evangelicals in Iowa. But pro-life is a big issue. And to hear him in his own words say, I'm very pro-choice, that's an effective ad.
All right, we're going to talk more about that in a second. But David, first, pounding the pavement, retail politics is so important to the Iowa voters. Will that help put Trump over the top?
Well, Iowa is a caucus state, not a primary state. What that means is people go into a room, often a high school gym or another public gathering place, and they go stand in a place that's designated for a candidate. And that's like a public declaration of support. It's very different than going into a private voting booth. But what it means for the campaigns is that if they've not invested time and personnel and resources in a ground game leading up to a caucus, it'll cost them. And I think in this case, I'd have to give the advantage to Ted Cruz because of the investment he's made in the ground game caucus apparatus, just like I think in the later states, after Iowa and New Hampshire, when we get to Nevada and the Super Tuesday southern states, I'd have to give the advantage to Hillary Clinton, who's built more of a ground game in those caucus states.
Well, we'll have to see. Tim, you mentioned evangelical voters. That's a key demographic. Just today, Liberty University President Jerry Falwell Jr. officially gave his personal endorsement to Donald Trump, saying he believes he's the man who can lead our country to greatness again. And he's not the only one. Over the last month, Trump has picked up 9 points when it comes to evangelicals. This, according to a new NBC News survey monkey poll. Cruz, meanwhile, has dropped to 5 points. Tim, it was Liberty University where Ted Cruz chose to announce his running for the presidency. Many would think evangelicals would kind of be Cruz's, wheelhouse, bread and butter, if you will. But this latest announcement and this poll seem to suggest otherwise. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, we'll see. It's this year has been crazy. And of course, anything involving Donald Trump has been crazy. The idea that a guy that has been married 3 times, that acknowledges, look, I've never really asked God for forgiveness, and that doesn't attend church with any regularity in years, the idea that he would be leading or taking a big chunk of evangelicals, it defies logic. But so does the entire Trump candidacy. So it's going to be a mystery next week. Just back to the previous point on the ground game, and the numbers are what we're told, what the Cruz camp told me is they have 9,000 people on the ground. And when you look at the caucuses done the way David said, the most people that have ever participated in an Iowa caucus was 189,000. So you have roughly 1 Cruz person for every 20 caucus goers. That is a really, really good ground game.
Yeah, maybe too little too late for Donald Trump trying the whole retail politics game. David, last minute or so to you, maybe a little bit less than that. Are you surprised by Donald Trump's ability to woo these evangelicals?
No, I actually think there was a really good analysis published lately that Donald Trump appeals to someone who likes an authority figure. And it would be logical. I don't want to...
I read that same one.
Yeah, so I don't want to make generalizations about evangelicals. There are lots of different kinds of evangelicals. But let's just say to the subset of evangelicals that appreciate the authoritative figure, that would make sense for Donald Trump. But there are probably other evangelicals that would look to a value statement or to someone who worships in the same way. So let's just say, for my argument here is, he's attracting a certain segment of the evangelical population.
All right, we'll leave it there. That's an interesting take on this. We got more coming back. David and Tim are going to come back. The GOP establishment, they're picking sides, but are they really warming up to Donald Trump? Or are they trying to help somebody else? We'll discuss that when we come back. Part 2 of the Roundtable continues after this. Welcome back. We're talking about the candidates and their closing arguments in Iowa. Most of the polls show it as a 2-man race with Trump atop of Cruz, but the Republican Party's old guard is getting a little bit nervous, at least according to an article in today's National Journal. Party officials are trying to put their thumbs on the scale in favor of Trump, hoping it helps someone else more mainstream. Enter Marco Rubio. But as the National Journal suggests, GOP poobahs, their word, not mine, might be playing with fire. Back with us for part two of the roundtable, David Goodfriend and Tim Constantine. Tim, we heard about Iowa Governor Terry Branstad skewering cues. Senator Orrin Hatch says he's coming around to the idea of Trump as the nominee. Bob Dole says he could maybe get on board. But do you buy this theory that the old guard is really just trying to take out Cruz so they can help Rubio?
I don't know if I buy that theory. It makes a great story, and I know they would like to have their establishment guy in there. I think the story goes, if you can narrow the field, and after New Hampshire, especially after South Carolina, the field will get narrowed down to 4 candidates, maybe 3 candidates. That's when we'll see how much steam Trump has, because if he's just matched up 1-to-1 against Cruz, he loses in the polls. If he's matched up in a 3-way poll with Cruz and Rubio, he doesn't necessarily win those either. So that's when we'll see the real race. I think the establishment trying to figure out who their guy will be when it turns into a 3-way race is kind of fascinating.
Well, you mentioned Rubio. Let's take a look at an attack ad by the pro-Rubio super PAC taking on Ted Cruz called Calcula Ted.
Ted Cruz calculates his positions for political gain. In the last year alone, Cruz switched on immigration, Syrian refugees, ethanol, trade, you name it. Even on national security, Cruz first praised the traitor Edward Snowden. Now he's changed his tune.
David, I have to ask you, get your expert opinion on this. Isn't it a bit dangerous for a pro-Rubio super PAC to hit Cruz for flip-flopping, given Rubio's kind of wavering stance on that whole immigration issue? Can you hear us, David?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that was directed to me. Of course it's dangerous. It's actually
Did the ad put you to
another...
sleep? I'm just kidding.
Well, the music in that ad was so peaceful. I just was starting to fall asleep over here.
You were in Zen.
No, look, I mean, just think about how Donald Trump was attacking Cruz for his birth certificate, and it was Cruz attacking Obama on the same theory months earlier. I mean, these things come back to bite you no matter what. And I think that the more vitriol you add to the mix, the more you're going to see it. Now, in this case, Rubio himself is, I think, probably sweating bullets over the fact that he's double digits behind both Trump and Cruz. So he's got to make a move. He's got to do something strong. I just don't think that this is the right line of attack. It would be much better, for example, for him to focus on the fact that Cruz has been unable to form alliances with his own fellow senators. I mean, you talk about why people are not lining up behind Cruz. They imagine him in the White House, and they can't really see them getting a deal out of it. They can't see their own agendas being pushed forward. That's something worth pointing out if I'm Rubio. But something like this that's going to just so easily come back to bite him, it strikes me as a short-sighted strategy.
Yeah, he said some big endorsements, but certainly no senators.
Yeah, George Pataki today. Well, Rubio might not be the only mainstream Republican with a shot at slaying the two dragons named Cruz and Trump. Today, Ohio Governor John Kasich got the endorsement of the Boston Globe. The paper says Republicans should vote for John Kasich for New Hampshire. They say GOP voters in the Grand State can do a service to their party on February 9th by voting for an experienced political figure with a record of results and thus dealing a blow to the divisive, demagogic candidates running on nativism and other political simplicities. That's quite a mouthful there.
Yes, it is.
I got to tell you guys,
You need a drink?
I actually made it onto a John Kasich commercial. Did you know this?
I did not know this.
We have
This is my question. This is my question for you, David, before we wrap up here. Let's just throw Cruz and Trump out just for the sake of argument here. Facing up against the Democratic nominee, who scares you more, Rubio or Kasich?
Well, I was just going to say to you that right here on Newsmax, I said Kasich scares me the most, and that clip made it onto a John Kasich ad.
No.
So,
They're watching us. They're watching us.
yeah, right here, from Newsmax to the political ad, you just can't beat it. But I stick with what I said and why I got picked up on that ad. Of course, John Kasich makes me more nervous than Ted Cruz because I think he'd have a better shot at Ohio, he'd have a better shot at centrist voters, and he just simply doesn't have a prayer in this nominating contest, and that gives me as a Democrat a little bit more hope that we're going to get a candidate that we can shoot at more easily. I think John Kasich would be the most logical choice for a general election campaign out of all the candidates, but logic does not govern here. We're dealing with
All right, 20 seconds left for Tim. Any chance John Kasich can squeak out a win in New Hampshire, shock the world, and take the nomination, yes or no?
Chance, yes. If Trump loses, if Cruz wins in Iowa, Trump is suddenly vulnerable. He is no longer inevitable. somebody else is going to win in New Hampshire. Could that be John Kasich? Sure.
That's why we keep watching all the way to New Hampshire.
Check into that ad that you were talking about, David.
Yeah, you gotta check that out. It's like the playoffs leading up to the Super Bowl. You never know what's.
All right, there you go.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, both for joining us. Pleasure to have you as always. Still to come here, a Houston grand jury indicts the man behind those undercover Planned Parenthood videos, but the investigation is far from over. We'll explain.